Hey y'all, happy Sunday and welcome to this week's live Q&A session. This is the portion of the show where we allow YouTube to send out notifications that we're going live. If you're watching this live Q&A on replay, please scrub ahead until this graphic disappears and the actual show begins. If you're watching live and you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the live chat. But for now, grab a beverage, sit back, and relax while the countdown timer does its thing. Then we'll get started. Morning, y'all. Happy Sunday. Now I can officially say good afternoon, y'all. Happy Sunday afternoon. Hope everybody got in some shop time this weekend. I finally got a little bit of shop time. Not a lot has changed from all outward appearances behind me, but I did get the machine. I got the tabletop. That plywood. I'm sitting here using my cursor like you can see it. The plywood tabletop, the MDO board tabletop. It is finally all sealed and everything and bolted down to the machine, which added to the structural rigidity immensely. I then went through Avid's um, routine following their directions on squaring the gantry and making sure it was square. And I have to say, the gods must have been smiling upon me, the CNC gods, because the first test it was absolutely spot on. So it was all nice and squared. I got it leveled so that the two sides of the y-axis are coplanar, and got the spindle trimmed yesterday afternoon, and I am very proud of that, um, because I got it down to I'm easily within half a thousandths front to rear. Um, but I'll get into that more next week. All the video is shot for it. The video that was supposed to have gone live today. It's all shot for it. I have to do the intro and outro later this afternoon, then get that all edited, and it'll be ready to go next Sunday. Um, from there, I can now finally start the spoil board proper. And right now, I just have a piece of MDF clamped up there, and that's what I did all my squaring tests on and everything else. On a related note, just to check tram and make sure everything is going okay, I've got one of these pieces of the Armorite from Roseburg. For those of you who have ordered samples, let me throw this in there. I peeled off that paper cover, and the adhesive that they use to glue that paper cover on is an absolute mess. I am not going to even attempt to wipe it off with anything. I'm just going to run this edge through the table saw, just trim it right off. And then to check tram, I'm going to use my fly cutter to surface the top and get rid of their logo that they carved into it, and just check it out. And the fly cutter I'm going to use is this way too expensive Amana RC2255 fly cutter, and give it its first proper workout. So, let's see how that works. That will also be included in next week's video. Succeed or fail. Had a lot going on this week, so I didn't really get a whole heck of a lot of shop time, but that's hopefully going to be changed this coming week. Let's see. Steve Perdue is asking, are you there? Yeah, I'm here. If there's an issue out there with audio or video, please let me know. But I think I'm here. So let's see. We've got a couple of questions, but before we get to the questions, wanted to do something that I don't normally do and that I need to correct. I need to do it a lot more often, and that is acknowledge Harneal Media. Steve over at Harneal Media, he's not only a moderator here in the chat, but he also sponsors my website, marklindsaycnc.com. And I wanted to give him a special shout out simply because he is absolutely awesome. If you're looking for a website, want to expand your web presence, I 100% endorse everything Steve does over there at Harneal Media. He is awesome. And it's personalized service. Believe me, you're not talking to some faceless, nameless entity in a tech center. You're communicating with Steve, and I wholeheartedly support everything he's doing. And thank you, Steve, for everything that you do. So, okay, yeah, he says audio and video are fine here. Okay. And Garrett, welcome aboard, Garrett. Can hear perfectly well. And everybody else is saying yes, good on this end. So, okay. The other thing is, I've had a couple of uh, people reach out to me and say that on the replay of the live streams later on down the road, they can't see the live chat. And there's a reason for that I was reminded of last week, and I forgot to mention it last week. And that is something within YouTube itself. If you're watching live, you know that I play a 5-minute countdown timer that has some cool kind of jazzy, bluesy music, and we just kind of hoot and holler. That countdown timer is there to let YouTube send out the notifications that we're going live and give folks a chance to get over here before we actually start this portion of the live Q&A. What I do then after I'm finished, I post links to any videos or channels or products or whatever in the description of this video. Then I immediately go over to the editor and I trim out that countdown timer. So if you're watching this on replay, you don't see that countdown timer. It's totally gone. Something I didn't know is, oh, well, I kind of had heard it before, but didn't really take it to heart, was if you edit the video at all after it's live, you lose that live chat. So it is basically gone, and there's nothing I can do to retrieve it. So it's kind of a trade-off. I either keep that 5-minute countdown timer in the video long after the fact, which I don't see any reason to, or we lose the live chat. And I think that is an okay trade-off to make. Basically, because any questions that I get, I highlight them on screen and we talk about it from there. So there's nothing I can do to retrieve that chat, but I think it's on balance, it's a good trade-off. So let's see. Speaking of questions, let's go ahead and get right down to them. And if you have any questions or comments at all, feel free to put them in the live chat. If you guys want to talk amongst yourselves, go right ahead. Let's see here. Norman Peterson asks, cutting out a 3D item. I had to put an inside offset vector to get rid of the ridge on the outside at the base of the 3D. Is that how it's done? Okay, now it depends on what you're talking about. If you are carving the 3D model and then you're going to cut it out around the perimeter of that model, then there's a couple of ways to handle that. If you're talking about carving a model into a surface and then machining away the outside area, like in a dish or within a pocket or something, there are a couple of different ways of handling that. If you are cutting out around the perimeter of the model, then you can use, let me go ahead and take that down and go over to Aspire here. Let me make sure that I'm in the right screen before I do this. Okay. If you're cutting out a model around the perimeter, that's where you can use a boundary offset. The boundary offset will carry the bit beyond the model boundary by this amount. Okay, now I see that you're talking about a model into the surface. Okay, if you're carving out a model into a surface, if you're machining away all of, say, this area here and leaving your model standing proud, then you can create a outline around the model, and you can create the vector around the outside of the model, offset that outwards, and then pocket the rest of it out, because a pocket's going to go a lot faster than a 3D toolpath will do, a 3D finishing toolpath, because you can use a much wider step over and a much larger bit for that. But the way you handled it, yes, that's perfectly acceptable. An offset vector outside and then machine to that offset vector. That's certainly acceptable. And in fact, that's a lot of what I do. For instance, on that one, let me stop sharing here. On that one sign I made for my wife with the Latin words V carved into a pocket, then I had 2 rope borders. I 3D modeled those 2 rope borders, then pocketed everything else out, the area in the middle, in between those 2 rope borders. And it went much faster than if I would have run the 3D model across the whole surface. So yes, the way you handled it is perfectly fine. So, see, IL Peleg said it might be a better trade-off to shorten the time to around 1 minute. If I edit the video at all, the chat goes away. Even if I take out one single frame, the live chat goes away. So if you're talking about shorten the countdown to 1 minute, I used to do that. And I still got a lot of complaints that I wasn't getting the notification in time. I missed the first 2 or 3 minutes. So I kind of, now I know some folks that use a 10-minute timer, and I think that's just way too much. But it's kind of a balancing act on giving people enough of a warning that I'm getting ready to go live and actually starting. So, I could reduce the countdown as well, but then I increase the likelihood that folks are going to, miss the first few minutes. So I don't know. It's a trade-off. We'll see where it goes. So let's see here. Okay, Mario Montoya says, I just created a separate clearance toolpath on a new layer for the vector sections of interest. Took additional editing time, but did help with reducing some annoying cutting. And this is in reference to Norman's comment about, or question about doing the offset vector to eliminate the ridge around it. And yes, what you would basically do in that situation, just as Mario is talking about, use the separate clearance toolpath and offset the vector. So you've got let me just do one here. Hold on. Go back over to Aspire, and I'll just do one here, and I'll make it simple. Let's go into clip art, and let's see something. Let's grab an animal, my alligator. Okay, and we'll go into modeling, and I'll increase the size a little bit here, and this is not going to be any kind of super detail, simply because I have my resolution set so low. Select the model and create a vector around that model. Okay, then come in here and select that vector, and I'm going to come back over here into drawing, and I'm going to offset that outwards. If I'm going to carve this with a 1/8 inch bit, I want to offset outwards by that amount. So that would be 0.125 and offset outwards. Create sharp offset corners, select new and offset, and close. Well, I shouldn't have gone that much. Well, what I'll do is I'll just select that and delete it. Don't want any inside islands. Okay, now when I go to machine this out, select the model, hold down Shift, select that offset vector outwards. And that's what I'm going to machine to. Okay. And on my 3D finishing toolpath. Then when I go to pocket this out or machine out the rest of it, and this was a bad example because I got a lot of small inside parts here. I'm not going to calculate a toolpath for that because it'd take too long. Then when I go to pocket this area out and machine all this area out, that's the vector I'll use to pocket up to. So the two overlap. You see what I'm getting at here? So, and I believe I did that method in a video. I'll look for it. Write a note to myself, offset vectors in 3D. I'll look for the video because I think I've used that in a couple of different videos. So, let's see here. Oh, Mario corrected me. Was a reference to a question I asked about removing sections of unwanted clearance 2D toolpaths without having to edit any G-code. Okay, but again, it applies also to the 3D carving. So, but yeah. Let's see here. IL says, personally, I have an alarm clock, not waiting for the YouTube notification. Well, okay. Hey, if that works for you, if that works for you. Okay. Lewis Denton says there are interesting things that go on in the live chat. I would favor enduring the 5 minutes to keep the exchanges. Okay. All right. Noted. And in fact, I may put up a poll. I may put up a poll on my community tab and ask this question. Should I keep the 5-minute countdown timer and just let it go? Or should I get rid of it? Now, I wish YouTube would fix that. Somebody up above here said, Brooks Martin says the live chat was there after a couple of days, FYI. Okay, there may be some of them that I forgot to do that on, but you know, I will check into that. And I may go ahead and okay. I say keep. We can always advance in the video. Okay, duly noted. Duly noted. Making me rethink everything here, and I'm not good at thinking on the spot. So, okay, let's see here. R Russ 45826 says, where do you buy the coated plywood you use? This is called MDO board, and the MDO stands for medium density overlay. And I got it at my hardwood supplier. It was a full sheet, and let me just say from the outset, it's not cheap. It is more expensive than regular hardwood or softwood plywoods because it's all made with waterproof adhesives. And then there's also the resin bonded paper and all that other good stuff. So it is more expensive than standard plywood. But call around to your local hardwood suppliers and lumber yards. If they don't have it, most of them can get it. But you're looking for MDO board. And I I like it. It's used a lot for sign making, and uh, in fact, when I was in real estate, the company I worked through, if we could make our own outdoor signage, but they required it to be MDO board, and just because it lasts longer in exterior uh, applications. So um, I became a fan of it. I had used it once before, about 30 years ago, and forgotten how much I liked working with it. So, you know, it's very good for exterior applications. Having said that, it is still a wood product. And if you make any cuts, or even if you leave it, you know, don't cut it, you will need to seal the edges. And for that, I just used in this application, I just used what did I use? I used Helmsman Spar urethane, just brushed it on. You'll see that next week in the video. And it doesn't matter if it's gloss or flat or what have you, just seal the edges so it doesn't absorb moisture. In an outdoor environment, we painted it, and just a little cheat, we used exterior latex house paint. If it's good enough for a house, it's good enough for a sign. So, you know, okay, lots of people saying vote to keep the live chat, can easily scrub through the waiting time. Okay. Um, yeah, Steve, that's a good idea. Split the difference and shorten the pre-roll to 3 minutes. Okay. All right. Well, then that means I have to find some music. All right, I can do that. Let's see now. I am going to try like crazy not to butcher your name, but I probably will butcher your name, and let me apologize beforehand. Bohan Hegedus. I hope I didn't just tear that up. And I know you're screaming at your monitor right now. I apologize. On a profile toolpath, there are two places to put an offset. Can you explain how this is meant to be used, like in machine vectors and in last pass, how to properly use this? Okay, well, let's jump over to, again, jump over to Aspire, and I'll back out of here. Let's jump back over. Come on, keyboard. Let's go over to, no, let's not do that. Let's just select everything, delete it. Yes, you too. Delete. Okay, let's see. We'll just put a vector out here that I'm going to machine in a profile toolpath. Got my vector selected. We'll come over here. All right. And just for this demonstration, I'll put in, I think, Z equals, and that is my cut depth all the way through it. And let's use a 1/4 inch end mill, select. All right. Now I'm going to machine to the outside of the vector, and you'll notice that offset allowance lit up. If I have it on the vector, it's grayed out. I can't enter anything here. An offset allowance will allow you, it will force the bit to cut either slightly outside or slightly inside of the vector. Now, personally, I don't use an allowance offset. If I want to cut a square that is 2 inches by 2 inches, I just make my square 2 inches by 2 inches. Now, I can see where it would come in handy if maybe something was undersized. But personally, you know, I don't really use an allowance offset much. Just for example, if I were to create this, and let's make it something dramatic so we can easily see it. If I put in an allowance offset of positive 1/2 inch and then calculate the toolpath. Now let me come back over here to the 2D view and we can see a wireframe of where that toolpath is going to actually cut. Let me switch it over to solid and you can see this is where the tool is going to cut. That far away from that vector. Okay. And that button that I just clicked is right up here. Toggle the toolpath 2D drawing style. Wireframe or solid. This is solid and this is wireframe. That's what we usually see. Now, if I go close this and go back into the toolpath and I make that a negative number, then calculate the toolpath, then come back over here to the 2D view, we see it's going to cut to the inside of that vector. Okay, and we'll click on the solid and you see how it cuts way to the inside. So that is that one allowance. Let me turn that back off here and go back into this profile. So that is the allowance offset. I'll set that to 0, meaning I want the tool to actually cut to where since I'm cutting to the outside of the vector, I want that tool to cut right on the edge of that vector. Okay. When we get down here on a separate last pass, this allowance, I use this quite often. Now, having said that, on my Gatton CNC, I use this quite often because the router I had, I made shallow passes because I didn't want to overload the router or the tool. On the Avid, with a much more powerful spindle, I'll be able to go with deeper passes. And if you've ever looked at the edge of a part after you've cut it out, you'll see trails, the witness marks, as to the various depths each pass has cut. So a separate last pass means, let's say in this case, the bit's going to make 6 passes. It will make 5 passes. Then on the 6th pass, it'll lift up out of the material and then plunge back in and make one final pass, the whole depth of the thickness of your material or the thickness of your cut depth here. What this allowance is how far away from this vector that last pass, or excuse me, the previous 5 passes are going to be. Now, what I do is I use 0.01 of an inch. Now, let me do a real quick here. 0.01 inch in millimeters. That's about 1/4 of a millimeter. So, so what I'll do is I'll enter that here. And now what's going to happen when I calculate this is the first 5 passes here are going to cut 0.010 of an inch or 1/4 of a millimeter to the outside of this vector. Then that last pass is going to move back in that 1/4 of a millimeter or 0.010 of an inch and cut right on this line. giving you a nice, flat, straight, smooth edge without any of those witness marks. If you look at your part without using a separate last pass, you may even notice a little dimple where that bit plunged into the material. Using a separate last pass actually will remove that as well. So, let's see here. Sounds like this would be used as a kerf tool. So, in how to set it up completely, an upper setting of 0.01 and also some. Okay, second one as well, a 0.01, or leave the first setting as 0 and the second 0.01. Yes, I leave my first setting up here, the allowance offset, I leave that at 0. I set 0.01 down here. And again, that's about 1/4 of a millimeter. So it just basically cleans up that edge, okay, by cutting the entire piece the full thickness. Now, again, on my previous router, I didn't want to, on the previous CNC, I didn't want to bog down the router, but removing that little, just that little sliver of material, 10,000ths of an inch, or say 1/4 of a millimeter, the bit and the router could handle that small width of material, 3/4 of an inch thick. And it just is basically done for aesthetics. So now up here in the allowance offset, I see Jeff over at JMJ Love Dance. Oops, there it is. If you want to get a close fit for a lid in a pocket, the allowance offset can be very useful. That is a perfect example of when using that allowance offset would be a useful thing, because you've cut the pocket and now you can test fit that lid. Cut the lid first, then when you do the pocket, you can add an offset to the toolpath without going in and changing the drawing. That's valuable. Yes, that's perfect. So, yes, Russell Faraday makes that a good point here. The flute length of your bit has to be long enough for a separate last pass. No prizes for guessing how I know. Yeah. Okay. Well, mistakes happen. If you learn from the mistake, then it wasn't a bad thing. So I almost always use that separate last pass just to clean up that edge and make it look much nicer. And it doesn't take any more machining time. It does take more machining time. I take that back. Probably a fraction of a second, just long enough for that bit to come out of the material, move in that 0.01, then plunge down and cut the entire thing at full thickness, full depth. I find that I have almost perfect edges with a combination of the separate last pass over here and ramping in, doing a smooth ramp over a distance of at least double the bit's cutting diameter. So in this case, I'm using a 1/4 inch bit. I would go for a 0.5 inch ramp. And let me calculate that. And we'll take a look at the toolpath here. When I spin it around, zoom in, kind of drag it over for you, you can see that remember the red is a rapid move. This is from the origin. It's going to move over to this point, drop down close to the surface of the material, then ramp in and start cutting, ramp in, cut the next one, ramp in, cut the next one, until it gets down to this 5th cut. Then it's going to lift out of the material. You can't see it. It didn't get any closer. Well, maybe you can a little bit. Yeah, there you go. Do a very slight rapid over that point one, then ramp in to that final cut, make the cut, then lift out. So that's how that separate last pass works. And it works beautifully. I use it a lot. So, okay, let's go ahead and get out of that. And let's see what we got here. Boom. Okay, JMJ Love Dance, and the diameter of an end mill is not always exact. Truth. When you buy a 1/4 inch end mill, that is a nominal diameter. It could be 0.251, 52, 0.24849. That's a nominal diameter. So unless you have taken a micrometer and measured your bit actual diameter, then you just basically have to kind of go with a nominal diameter there. I find in woodworking, most woodworking, that's not really necessary, simply because wood moves and it's going to expand and contract. Now, in a case of what they're talking about when they're talking about cutting lids to fit snugly in or on a box, then yes, you do really need to know the diameter of that bit, because you want a nice snug fit, but you also you don't want it to be too loose, but you also don't want to have to use a hammer to get it back on. So yes, that you do need to know exactly how big that bit is and be able to make adjustments without changing that drawing. So, and that might answer your question there, woodcutter. When mating boxes, what's the best way to sit clearance? Do you recommend for a snug fit? That's a trial and error and test thing. Remember, you can always remove material, but you can't put it back on. So sometimes you can either cut the lid. If the lid is slipping down into the box like a plug, you can sometimes cut just the same size and then sand the edge or sand the inside lip of the box. Other times you might want to use that offset allowance. I'll go ahead and make a video on using that offset allowance. I'll make a box and do it, but it'll be down the road a little bit. So it's there is a lot of trial and error because every material is going to be different, and you may never use the exact same settings twice, just simply because wood expands and contracts. And this piece of cherry that you're making this lid out of is going to be completely different than that piece of sapele you're going to make the next lid out of. So there is some trial and error there. So, and some of them just have to be tailor made. So let's see here. Okay, that should do that. And hopefully that answered the question. I know there's a lot of vagaries there, but sometimes there really is no immediate answer. So, Woodcutter says painfully aware. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing CNC for about 7 years, but I've been a woodworker for over 50, and sometimes there really isn't a cut and dried answer, and you have to tailor one piece to fit the next. That's not all that usual. That's not all that normal, but it can be depending upon what you make. You know, in the cabinet shop, I was used to a 1/16 of an inch builder's tolerance. So the thing could be out of square. there could be gaps. If you've got two cabinets fitting in between two walls, that's what trim and molding are for. So you get into fine woodworking and fine furniture, you've got a lot less room for error. And there's going to be a little bit of fitting and fettling and chisel work and, card scraper and things like that to get them to fit. So it just depends on what you're doing. And when you get into marquetry and inlays and things of that nature, you've just multiplied it many times more, because usually on something like that, it's going to be something held in your hand that you're going to see up close. If it's going to be 5 foot up on the side of a wall, who cares? But if you're going to be holding it in your hand, you want that to be perfect. So there's going to be some handwork. I have yet to get a piece off of the CNC table that was ready for finish. There's almost always some sanding, some scraping, some chisel work, some filing to get it ready for finish. And that and the finish itself, to me, makes or breaks the project. A lot of people say they don't like finishing. Well, it's just something that we're all going to have to do, simply because you can have the most beautiful hand-cut dovetails in the world, but if you half step when it comes to finishing, you might as well just spray paint it black, because without that finish highlighting the work that you put into those dovetails, there's no point in making them. You might as well just pocket hole it. So, it's a trade-off. But you know what? That's a moment of zen. That's when you get to sit back and chill. And you nailed it. Finish carpentry is the fine art of hiding your mistakes. My grandfather told me many, many years ago that the difference between a carpenter and a craftsman is a craftsman knows how to hide his mistakes. And it's been my experience for sure. Okay, Ronald Cool. How are people doing 3D carving and cutting through, say, like an inch and a half thick of material on, say, a profile cut, so the collet don't hit? Well, there's a couple of ways of doing that, Ron. Probably the most common, if you can, is to use an oversized piece of material and pocket out the material around where you plan on cutting a profile. So, for instance, let's say you have a 3-inch diameter circle that you're cutting in 2-inch material. I would carve out that circle, then carve away material to either side of it so that I could go all the way down and cut through that material. Another way they'll do it is cut as far as they can, take it off the machine and go over to a bandsaw and finish cutting out from there, and then use either a handheld router or a router table with a pattern trim bit with a guide bearing, and go around that way. Now, Todd HCNC went exactly where I was going after this. The other is look for extra long end mills, but be careful on that. It is, they can be hard to find because, well, they can be hard to find. They can be hard to find, if you can speak, for a reason. And that reason is because it's real easy to overstress it, and it's real easy to get a lot of bit deflection and snap that bit. And you don't want to snap a bit at 18 to 25,000 RPM. So the other option is make it a two-sided project and cut halfway through your profile on one side, flip it over, and cut the other half that way. I'll throw in a caveat here, and that is if you use tabs. What I tend to do is I will finish the profile cut on the bottom piece, meaning I'll cut through about halfway, and on my bottom profile, I will have some huge, thick tabs. And the reason for that is this. Let's say, let me find something here. Something simple. Here we go. If I'm cutting through this in 2 passes and I come down halfway and I've cut down to there, then I flip it over, it does absolutely no good to have a tab here because I've already cut that material away. So I have to have a tab up in here. So if I'm cutting 3/4 of an inch down and then flip it over, I need to have tabs basically the full thickness of the material so that I still have some tab here in the middle when I go to cut this out. You see what I mean? Now, Woodcutter says Amazon has 4-inch long, 1/4-inch end mill around $24. I would just caution you, and yes, and they do work. I would just caution you to slow down your feed rates and thereby increase your RPM so you get less deflection. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much pressure to deflect that bit. And when it starts to bend, when it starts to deflect, remember, carbide is very brittle. It won't take much to snap that bit off. So there's a couple of ways, and I think Todd's method is probably the better way to go, and that is make it a 2-sided project. It costs more too. You're absolutely right. Yes, and better make sure you have enough Z height under the bit. That's another good point, because if you've got 2 inches of material, you add a 4-inch bit on top of that. Yes, a lot of it's going to be buried in the collet, but let's say you put 1 inch of that bit in the collet, you've still got 3 inches of bit sticking out. Then you have your safe Z height above that. Now, if you got to go up to clear a clamp or something like that, you can run out of Z height real fast. So, and that's exactly what we're talking about there, IL. You have to make sure you have enough Z height to clear the bit, clear any clamps, and be able to cut all the way through the material. It just depends on how you want to do it. In this case, any of those options is pretty good. I mean, for me personally, I would, I'd probably do it 2-sided. And fair warning on that, I don't know if you've ever done a 2-sided project, and this is for everybody, not just Ronald Cool. If you've never done a 2-sided project, I encourage you to do one. But fair warning, they are addictive. I look for reasons to do 2-sided projects now. For some reason, to me, I just love the process. I love to do it. So, well, let's see here. I've only got one more off here to the side, and it's not a question. Excuse me. It's a comment by Russell Faraday, who said he's exhausted after an awesome day of sifting through a barn find of various hardwoods, all seasoned and cared for decades. Spent too much dosh or cash, and no idea what project to start first. My comment to that was, that's a great problem to have. I am so much of a wood nerd that I am carrying around pieces of wood, and we have moved, oh gosh, I don't know how many times. I am carrying around pieces of wood that I got in Germany when we were stationed there in the late 80s and early 90s. I'm carrying around pieces of wood that we got in Hawaii, and we left there in 1998. They're beautiful pieces. I may never do anything with them, but I like them. They're mine, so that's good enough justification for me. I did have to come to the realization, though, that it's time to start using this stuff. And if you saw and this relates to two-sided machining, if you saw my video on the mason jar lids, the canning jar lids, I used some material I got over in Hawaii to make those. I have finally decided, Russell, that I am no longer going to hoard wood. I'm going to start using it. It does nobody any good to sit around here, because after I'm gone, my kids are just going to come through and go, Dad was a hoarder, and throw it all away. So I'm going to use it for stuff that for special people and for special projects. So there you go. There's a suggestion. Start using it for special people and special projects. I finally decided that my wood hoarding days need to come to an end, mainly because I'm running out of room, but also because they're not going to do anybody any good sitting in a landfill when my kids clean out my stuff, which I know they're going to do. So just, I know free advice is worth every penny you're paying for it, but yeah, there it is. I mean, make something special for somebody special. And I mean, that's what all this is all about. So, but yeah, I'm with you. When somebody has something cool that they're just giving away like that, it's like, oh man. But now where are you going to put it? You know? So, but still, I am envious as heck. I wish I could run into that problem. So let's see. I hope I answered everybody's questions. Um, and we, you know, I hope you got some value out of this anyway. Um, I'm going to experiment. I'm going to take you guys' suggestion to heart. I'm going to experiment, and I am not going to go back and take out the 5-minute timer um, on this video, and we'll see what happens. Okay. And if I get a lot of complaints about it, um, then maybe we'll revisit. But personally, I don't care. I'm trying to, do what you guys want with that intro, simply because you're the viewer. It's your time that you're spending. So, yeah, Jeff, you hit it. Too much wood is not the problem. It's not enough space and time to store it and use it. And, that's why I want to start using it. I mean, I have some English oak that I got a hold of in Germany. Beautiful white oak. Oh, God, it's gorgeous. Well, doesn't do any good just sitting there. Time for me to use it. And so that's what I'm going to do. And give some to other woodworking friends. What the heck? You know, let them enjoy the fun. That Hawaiian wood that I made those jar lids out of, and I'll put a link to that video in the description. Um, I sent some to a friend in Texas, Billy Burt, and sent him a couple of pieces of it. And then, but one piece was earmarked. He got on his lathe and he turned a coffee scoop handle for my wife for her tea shelf project. So it matches the lids of the jars. Turned out beautiful. But I gave him a couple of pieces of it. So here you go, Billy, play with it. Don't know if he's going to make anything with it or not. But now he's got some material that he wouldn't normally be able to get his hands on. So just a thought. Okay, next week will be, let's see, we'll be doing the table mount, tramming, squaring, leveling, and I'm going to surface this piece today, and that video will be up next Sunday. This time I mean it. And from there, heaven only knows. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this. Oh yeah, Steve, you're right. I did send you some for a pen too. That's right. I did send you some. So, and I've yet to see a pen made of it. But that would mean you would have to step away from your computer. And when you run a website hosting service and you don't get, you're forgiven. Exactly. Don't let good wood go to waste. So anyway, next week will be that video. From there, I don't know. Channel members, remember live Q&A tomorrow. Not live Q&A, live stream tomorrow. We'll get everything taken care of, and I've got something in mind, but I'm not certain, so I'm not going to spill the beans yet. No, Steve, the wood from Hawaii was not koa. It was a wood called kamani. And if you watch that video, which I'll link in the description, you'll see what it looks like. Beautimous. And yes, John, preview of coming attractions. I got my T-Track, and it is shiny red anodized. More on this later on. Actually, I didn't plan on it to be red. It's just that's what they had, so that's what I got. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Channel members, see you tomorrow evening at 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. If you would like information on becoming a channel member, just click that join button down below. A panel will pop up, a video will play to tell you all about channel memberships. And we will see you next week. So until then, go do something cool. Go make some chips. Go, have fun. Pat your dog on the head. Kiss your wife. Get out of here. Go away. See y'all next week, y'all. And thank you, everybody.